The chamber was alive with the quiet hum of deliberation, a sea of shimmering lights and voices from species scattered across the galaxy. The Galactic Council's chamber, a sprawling amphitheater suspended in the void of space, housed representatives of the most advanced civilizations. Here, diplomacy was king, and the pursuit of peace reigned supreme, or so it was proclaimed. At the center stood High Arbiter Relivax, a towering figure of translucent, crystalline form, his voice resonating in harmonic tones that commanded attention. Humans, he began, his tone measured, have demonstrated remarkable tenacity, yet their nature betrays an inherent fear of war. They seek refuge in art, in diplomacy, and in building bridges where others would erect fortifications. Fragile as they are, they may not possess the constitution for a conflict of this scale. The statement hung in the air, a point of contention that stirred murmurs among the assembly. The war against the Kron Empire, a scourge known for their merciless campaigns and insatiable hunger for conquest, had pushed even the Council's finest to their limits. It was not the time for half measures, and yet here they were, discussing the inclusion of a fledgling species barely a century into spaceflight. From a far corner, a hulking figure with luminescent scales rose. Ambassador Torvek of the Bergarn Alliance regarded Relivax with narrowed, reptilian eyes. If their spirit is as fragile as their biology, why propose their involvement at all? The Kron do not negotiate. They consume. Weakness only invites annihilation. A ripple of agreement spread through the assembly. Relivax raised a crystalline hand, silencing the room. Desperation drives innovation, and humanity has shown an aptitude for adaptation unmatched in recent memory. Their history speaks to resilience, even in the face of insurmountable odds. Perhaps their perspective will offer solutions where we have seen none. Before dissent could flare further, the chamber's hollow display flickered to life. The figure of a human ambassador appeared, sharp-suited and flanked by aides. His name was Nathaniel Bryce, a seasoned diplomat whose steel-gray eyes betrayed a quiet confidence. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, Bryce began, his voice steady despite the sea of alien scrutiny. Your assessment of humanity is not without merit. We have indeed sought peace where others might have chosen war. But do not mistake our preference for diplomacy as an inability to fight. A murmur swept through the assembly. Bryce continued, his words deliberate. Earth has seen centuries of conflict, wars that shaped us, tested us, and taught us the cost of violence. We do not fear war. We respect it, and when faced with existential threats, we do what is necessary. Relivax inclined his crystalline head. Your conviction is noted, Ambassador Bryce. Yet words alone do not win battles. What forces will you offer in this fight? Bryce gestured to one of his aides, who activated a secondary display. It projected the image of a warship, sleek, angular, and unmistakably human. Beside it stood a contingent of soldiers, their uniforms sharp and their postures unyielding. The United States Marine Corps, Bryce declared. A force trained not just to survive war, but to dominate it. They embody the resolve of our species, forged in the crucible of countless battles. They will fight alongside you. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, disbelief mingling with intrigue. Torvek's growl rose above the din. Marines? These humans send soldiers of a single nation to represent their planet? This is arrogance, not aid. Bryce's expression did not waver. The Marines are not mere soldiers. They are a testament to humanity's ability to confront the unimaginable and prevail. If you doubt their resolve, then allow them to prove it. Relivax's crystalline form shimmered as he considered the proposal. Very well, Ambassador Bryce. Humanity's warriors shall join the Allied forces. But understand this. Should they fail, the consequences will be dire. Not just for them, but for all who stand against the Kron. Bryce inclined his head, his voice firm. They will not fail. The decision was made. Within days, the Marines would arrive to take their place on the front lines of a war unlike any humanity had faced before. Yet doubt lingered among the Council. To them, humans were a puzzle, delicate yet defiant, peaceful yet paradoxically drawn to the chaos of conflict. As the council adjourned, Relivax remained in the chamber, his crystalline form dimmed in contemplation. Beside him, an advisor materialized, a figure of shifting energy and light. "Do you believe they can stand against the Kron?" the advisor inquired. Relivax's response was a soft hum, almost mournful. "Humans are an enigma. Their potential is uncertain as their fate. But in their eyes I see a spark. Not fear, but something deeper. Perhaps they will surprise us all." Far away, on a distant military installation orbiting Earth, the Marines prepared. Armor was inspected, weapons calibrated, and strategies reviewed. In their ranks, no trace of hesitation could be found. They were not just preparing for a battle. They were stepping into the unknown, carrying the weight of their planet's reputation on their shoulders. The Council believed humanity feared war. The Marines would show them what it meant to master it. The warship Resolute Endeavor slipped into orbit above the Galactic Council station, a stark contrast to the sleek, organic curves of the alien vessels surrounding it. Its angular, utilitarian design spoke volumes about humanity's approach to engineering. Function over form, built for durability and purpose. Within its steel hulls, the United States Marine Corps readied themselves for their first contact with the allies they were meant to support and impress. Captain Sarah Anders stood in the armory, her gaze sweeping over her squad as they conducted their final equipment checks. The hum of exosuits powering up filled the air, the faint blue glow of kinetic shields outlining each Marine. Her second-in-command, Gunnery Sergeant Alan Vega, approached, his ever-present smirk betraying none of the tension she knew he must feel. "They're going to love us," Vega quipped, hefting his plasma rifle and spinning it with practiced ease. "First impressions and all that?" Anders raised an eyebrow. "Try not to scare them too much, Gunny. We're here to be allies, not a sideshow." He grinned. "Can't help it if they're impressed. Humans are just that good." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the faint smile tugging at her lips. Confidence was Vega's armor, and it had a way of bolstering everyone around him. The comm crackled, and a voice came through. "Captain Anders, you're clear to disembark. Council representatives are waiting in the docking bay." The squad formed up with practiced precision, their footsteps echoing in unison as they marched to the airlock. As the hatch opened, Anders caught her first glimpse of the station's interior, a marvel of alien design, with crystalline walls that pulsed faintly like living veins and a gravity-defying architecture that defied human logic. Standing before them was a delegation of council members, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. At the forefront was High Arbiter Relivax, his crystalline body refracting light like a living prism. Beside him stood Ambassador Torvek, whose reptilian features twisted into what Anders suspected was a frown. The rest of the delegation murmured among themselves, their alien eyes scanning the humans with open curiosity and skepticism. Anders stepped forward, saluting with crisp precision. "Captain Sarah Anders, United States Marine Corps. We're here to assist in your fight against the Kron." Relivax inclined his head, his voice resonating in harmonious tones. "Welcome, Captain Anders. We are intrigued to see humanity's finest in person." Torvek's growl cut through the air. "They are smaller than I expected." Vega chuckled softly, earning a sharp glance from Anders. "With respect, Ambassador," she said, keeping her tone neutral, "size isn't everything. You'll find we more than make up for it in other ways." Relivax's crystalline form shimmered, a gesture Anders guessed was amusement. "We shall see. For now, you will accompany us to the tactical simulations. It is customary for new allies to demonstrate their capabilities before joining the front lines." The Marines exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable beneath their helmets, but Anders knew what they were thinking. A test. Of course, there was a test. They followed the delegation through the station's corridors, a labyrinth of alien beauty that felt strangely sterile to Anders. The tactical chamber was no less impressive, a vast space lined with holographic projectors and observation platforms. The Marines stood at the center as the simulation began to load, the chamber shifting into a virtual battlefield that shimmered with uncanny realism. Torvek loomed at the edge of the platform, his scaled arms crossed. This will simulate a standard Kron assault. Let us see if these humans can adapt to our enemy's methods. Anders nodded to her squad. You heard of Marines? Let's show them what we've got. The battlefield materialized in an instant. A war-torn cityscape under siege, alien ships hovering ominously overhead. The Kron forces, hulking, insectoid creatures with serrated limbs and bioorganic weapons, swarmed from every direction. Anders barked orders, her voice sharp and clear over the comms. The Marines moved like a well-oiled machine, their exosuits enhancing their speed and strength as they took up defensive positions. Plasma fire erupted from their rifles, cutting through the simulated Kron with surgical precision. The aliens watching from the platform exchanged murmurs, their skepticism beginning to waver. The humans fought with a blend of discipline and improvisation, their strategies fluid and unorthodox. Vega took down a group of Kron with a well-placed grenade, then covered another Marine who was reloading. Meanwhile, Corporal Jenks hacked into a simulated alien terminal, redirecting enemy forces into a choke point where the Marines unleashed devastating firepower. Torvek growled low in his throat. They fight like cornered prey, desperate and unpredictable. Relivax's crystalline form shimmered again. Or perhaps like hunters who understand their terrain. The battle raged on, and the Marines adapted to every shift in the simulation. When aerial threats descended, they coordinated to bring them down with precision shots. When the Kron swarmed in greater numbers, they held the line with unyielding determination. As the final wave of enemies fell, the simulation dissolved, leaving the Marines standing in the now-empty chamber. Their armor was scorched and their breathing heavy, but their posture remained defiant. Anders turned to the delegation, her tone calm but edged with pride. Satisfied? Relivax inclined his head. Impressive. Your adaptability is notable. Torvek's frown deepened, but he said nothing. Vega removed his helmet, his grin wide and unapologetic. Told you we'd impress. Relivax's shimmering gaze rested on him, then on Anders. You have passed the first test, Captain, but the true challenge lies ahead. The Kron will not fall so easily. Anders met his gaze, her voice firm. We wouldn't expect them to, but we didn't come here to lose. As they exited the chamber, Anders allowed herself a moment to breathe. The Council might not fully trust them yet, but they had made their mark. The Marines were ready, and the galaxy would soon understand what humanity was capable of. And far in the distance, in the cold expanse of space, the Kron Empire loomed, a threat that demanded everything they had and more. The real war was coming, and the Marines were just getting started. The deployment order came with the urgency of a heartbeat. On the edge of Kron-controlled space, a colony world known as Delph Prime was under siege. The Kron had torn through its defenses, leaving the planet's remaining inhabitants trapped in sprawling underground shelters. The Marines were tasked with holding the line until the Galactic Council's forces could regroup, a mission with no guarantees and no margin for error. Captain Sarah Anders stood on the bridge of the Resolute Endeavor, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Delph Prime's surface was a mosaic of destruction, its cities reduced to skeletal remains under the relentless assault of Kron forces. Beside her, Gunnery Sergeant Vega leaned against the console, his usual bravado subdued as he studied the data. They're dug in deep, he muttered, and there's no telling how many Kron are down there. Could be 1,000, could be 10. Anders folded her arms, her gaze steady. Doesn't matter. We hold the line. That's the mission. The ship's AI chimed in, its voice calm yet authoritative. Orbital scans confirm significant enemy presence around the colony's central shelter. Deployment in T-minus 15 minutes. Anders turned to her squad, assembled and ready. Each Marine bore the weight of the mission in their stance, but there was no hesitation in their eyes. Listen up, she began, her voice firm. We're not just fighting for the people of Delph Prime. We're fighting to prove that humanity belongs here. They think we're fragile, that we're out of our depth. Let's show them what Marines are made of. Vega grinned, his confidence rekindled. Oh yeah, Captain. Let's remind them why we're called the few and the proud. The drop on a Delph Prime was a symphony of controlled chaos. The Marines descended in drop pods, their entry burning streaks across the planet's smog-filled sky. The moment the pods hit the surface, the Marines burst out, weapons raised, and immediately engaged the Kron forces. The battlefield was a nightmare made real. The Kron swarmed like a living tide, their bioorganic weaponry pulsing with alien energy. Their chittering roars filled the air, a sound that seemed to gnaw at the edges of sanity. But the Marines were unshaken. Anders moved with precision, directing her squad through the ruins of a once thriving city. Plasma fire illuminated the darkened streets, and the ground shook with the force of explosions. Vega was a whirlwind of destruction, his plasma rifle cutting through waves of Kron while his sharp commands kept the squad cohesive. "On your six, Jenks," he shouted as Corporal Jenks turned to see a Kron warrior lunging at her. She ducked just in time for Vega's well-aimed shot to take the creature down. "Thanks, Gunny," Jenks said, her voice tight but steady. "Don't mention it." Eyes forward, the fight raged on, every moment a battle for survival. Despite their numbers, the Kron lacked the tactical coordination that defined the Marines. The squad used the terrain to their advantage, drawing the enemy into kill zones and executing swift, decisive strikes. Still, the Kron pressed harder, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm. Anders knew they couldn't sustain this pace forever. She called for a fallback to the colony's central shelter, their designated stronghold. As they moved, Anders caught sight of a group of civilians trapped under the rubble of a collapsed structure. She signaled Vega to cover her as she rushed to free them. The weight of the debris was immense, but her exosuit amplified her strength, allowing her to lift the wreckage just enough for the civilians to crawl out. "Get to the shelter," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The civilians ran, and Anders turned back to see Vega holding the line with relentless precision. She joined him, and together they pushed back the advancing Kron until the squad was safely inside the shelter's fortified perimeter. Inside, the situation was grim. Hundreds of civilians crowded the space, their faces pale with fear. The air was thick with tension, but the sight of the Marines brought a flicker of hope. Anders quickly assessed their position. The shelter's defenses were minimal, and the Kron would breach it in a matter of hours if reinforcements didn't arrive. She opened a comm channel to the Resolute Endeavor. "Status on Council forces?" The ship's AI responded, its tone clipped. "Allied reinforcements are 2 hours out. You'll need to hold until then." Anders clenched her jaw. 2 hours in this hell might as well be an eternity. "We've got this," Vega said, as if reading her thoughts. "We always do." The Marines fortified their position, using what little resources they had to create makeshift barricades and reinforce weak points. When the Kron assault came, it was unlike anything they'd faced before. The aliens hurled themselves at the shelter with reckless abandon, their desperation to claim the colony driving them to greater ferocity. The Marines fought like demons. Anders directed the defense with unyielding resolve, her commands sharp and decisive. Vega was a constant presence at her side, his humor replaced by a grim determination. Jenks and the others held their positions, their plasma fire never faltering. Despite the odds they held, when the reinforcements finally arrived, the Council forces descended in a coordinated strike that scattered the remaining Kron. As the dust settled, Anders surveyed the battlefield, her armor scorched and her squad battered but alive. Relivax arrived with the Council troops, his crystalline form shimmering as he took in the scene. "You have accomplished what many thought impossible," he said, his tone carrying a note of respect. Anders removed her helmet, her face streaked with dirt and sweat but unbowed. "We're Marines. Impossible is what we do." Torvik approached, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he studied the humans. "Perhaps I underestimated you," he admitted grudgingly. Vega smirked, leaning on his rifle. "Told you we'd impress." Relivax's gaze lingered on Anders, his voice softening. "Today, you have earned not just our respect, but a place among us. Humanity has proven it is more than capable of standing against the darkness." Anders nodded, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. The fight's not over yet. We got a war to win. As the council forces secured the colony, Anders allowed herself a moment to breathe. They had survived, and in doing so, they had begun to rewrite humanity's place in the galaxy. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The Krong would come again, and the Marines would be ready.